If you've been a fan of MMORPGs at any point in the past decade, you've probably heard the term WoW killer thrown around when it comes to discussions about what will be the next big MMO. The truth is, I think the term WoW killer is very subjective, and at this point has multiple definitions depending on the context of conversation. For example, do we define a WoW killer as an MMORPG that simply overtakes WoW in terms of player numbers, or does it need to be a revolutionary MMO that achieves the same level of popularity as World of Warcraft did at its peak? Do you define a WoW killer as another MMO that you personally quit WoW for, or another MMORPG that got you as addicted as WoW did at its peak? Or do you hear the word WoW killer and think of a scenario that causes WoW to literally be shut down due to a lack of players and no longer being profitable? As someone that's been covering MMOs for the best part of 7 years now, I mostly see the term WoW killer come up whenever a new MMORPG is announced or gaining hype, whether it be New World, Ashes of Creation, Black Desert, and so on. In the comments I'll see things along the lines of, "This game will never be as popular as WoW, looks like another WoW killer, this game's too niche to kill WoW," and my reaction to reading this stuff is always, who fucking cares? Like, I do not understand the absolute obsession from the MMORPG community about the game that will eventually have more players than WoW. And I came to this opinion back in 2015 in the middle of Warlords of Draenor, sitting alone in my garrison thinking, I'm playing the most popular MMORPG in the world right now, but it doesn't matter because the world feels dead, players are constantly phasing in and out of existence from sharding, and there's very little organic social interaction due to how the game's fundamentally designed. Outside of your 30 to 40 player guild, who gives a shit how many people play WoW? You'll never see or interact with 99.9% of the player base, and the game is designed in a way that players have no impact on the world. As long as you can still find groups for instanced PvP and PvE, you're gonna have roughly the same experience with the game having 1 million players as you had with 5 million players. Sure, you'll see less people AFK in capital cities and longer queue times, but that's about it. The game just doesn't rely on a lot of players for you to experience all of the content. What I think most people really mean when they use the term WoW killer is what game will be able to lift the MMORPG genre back to being the hype genre, in the same way it was from around 2004 to 2010, where it felt like every game dev was trying to make a WoW competitor. When it comes to genre popularity, it seems to go in cycles. Over the past decade, these hype genres include MOBAs, survival games, card games, Minecraft clones, and recently, Battle Royale. The best way to tell what hype cycle we're currently in is asking yourself what bandwagon are developers trying to jump on at any given time. Recently it feels like we've had a bit of a BR phase with Fortnite, then a gacha phase with Genshin Impact, and now I'm seeing a lot of devs rush to implement crypto into their games to jump on the blockchain gaming and play to earn hype that went mainstream with Axie Infinity. When it comes to the WoW killer, I think people assume this will be a game that's similar to what WoW was back at its peak, something recognizable, but I actually don't think this will be the case. The MMORPG community that went through that MMO hype phase are essentially a different generation of gamer. Back then we weren't as jaded by the genre, we didn't grow up with microtransactions or pay to win, instant gratification and convenience were less prevalent in terms of game design back then, and I'd actually say we had a longer attention span than your average gamer nowadays. The thing is, the actual WoW killer will be a game that becomes massively popular with the average gamer now, and I'm not sure if such a game will live up to the expectations of the MMO audience of old. This WoW killer will create a new generation of MMORPG gamers that possibly don't like the same design philosophies as the previous generation. Maybe the game to repopularize the MMORPG genre will be cross-platform. Maybe it'll have play to earn and crypto integration. Maybe it'll be some form of Pokemon Go augmented reality app, or perhaps it won't come until technology advances to the point of full dive Ready Player One style VR. I know a lot of people have touted New World, Star Citizen, and Ashes of Creation to be games to make MMOs mainstream again, but I personally think it's more likely that a less niche game, such as the recently announced Farmville-style MMO Palia, has a better chance at that kind of success, which brings me to my next point. Whilst the next game to take the MMORPG genre by storm may not be the WoW killer people are expecting, that doesn't mean that you won't find your subjective WoW killer. For me personally, I've already had this game come and go. Ever since I got hooked on Black Desert Online from 2016 to 2018, I've never been able to play WoW as a main MMO since. Sure, I'd check out the new expansions and resub for a few months, but it didn't make me want to throw away my life like BDO did. And whilst I don't play Black Desert anymore, those first 2 years of its Western release gave me that same feeling of being completely addicted as back when I first tried WoW back in TBC. So that's kinda how I personally prefer to use the term WoW killer, as something subjective almost to describe my main MMO for the foreseeable future. With that in mind, the two games on the horizon I can see myself maining are New World and Ashes of Creation, although currently I don't see New World as being a game I'll play all year around, as I could see myself running out of content fast with it being a theme park. As long as those two games have enough players that I can experience all the content without feeling like the games are dead, I couldn't really care less if the broader gaming community considers them to be successful WoW killers or not. They'd be WoW killers to me, which is all that matters really. Usually whenever the WoW killer conversation comes up, a common point of view is the only game that can kill WoW is itself, and I actually agree with this to a certain extent. People still play old MMOs like Guild Wars 1, Ultima Online, and the original EverQuest 15 to 20 years later. If Shadowlands was the final WoW expansion and Blizzard just stopped adding content, people would still be farming mounts and transmogs 10 years later, or making their own content through leveling challenges or classic servers. One thing that would speed up the game's decline though, is if Blizzard starts to lose the goodwill of its community, causing players to resent the company and quit the game. But this is obviously something Blizzard would be very careful to avoid, right? It's not as if they're going to design pointless systems to frustrate the player base, add boosts to classic servers, add more aggressive monetization, mistreat their employees, ignore the community, and piss off the biggest content creators that market their game for free, especially with competitors like Final Fantasy XIV and New World waiting to scoop up any potential WoW refugees. That'd be very bad business long term, and such a big company would surely not make those mistakes. Jokes aside, for the longest time I actually thought the WoW killer would actually be World of Warcraft 2. Before Battle for Azeroth was announced, I was high on hopium that after all the time travel bullshit in WoD and a fairly climactic story with Legion, I thought that'd be the perfect time to do a full story reset in WoW. Perhaps we defeat the big evil or something happens that causes a long period of peace in Azeroth. Maybe a few thousand years go by in the game's storyline, Blizzard announced Warcraft 4 at BlizzCon to introduce a whole new cast of characters to get people invested into the new story, and then boom, they announced that for years they've been secretly working on World of Warcraft 2, and it starts by us going back to just being a normal adventurer, rediscovering the world, questing our way from noob to hero. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out that way, or maybe it will, but it'll happen at the end of the next expansion or something. I've still got the smallest drop of hopium. That being said though, regardless of if Blizzard have been secretly working on WoW 2, I don't think I trust them to make a truly great MMORPG anymore. The Blizzard that created peak WoW have all pretty much left, and the current team seems to lack passion and talent. On top of that, I think the role of Activision would also stifle any chance the game would have of critical success, due to their needs to appease shareholders every month, likely resulting in heavy monetization. As an MMORPG player, the past 5 years or so has felt like the dark ages for the genre, but the good news is that I think we're actually soon approaching the point of us coming out of that. WoW killer or not, we've actually got some solid MMORPGs coming out soon that will hopefully satisfy that new MMO launch feeling that we all get nostalgic over. New World is the big one coming this year after numerous delays, and whilst I do think it'll be a game that you'll play on and off as new content is added, I'm certain that this is at least going to be a top 5 MMO by most people's standards. Lost Ark is right around the corner with a Western release date and is one of the few MMOs out of Korea to actually gain massive popularity post-launch in recent years. Elion might be fun for a week or two. Final Fantasy XIV is pretty much at the point of, or very close to, dethroning WoW as the top MMORPG in terms of player numbers, and this is before its new expansion set to release in November. In my opinion, a new top dog is just great for the genre overall. Black Desert, Elder Scrolls Online, Albion Online, and RuneScape are all very healthy in terms of player numbers and still producing content at a reasonable pace. Bless Unleashed, Swords of Legends Online, PSO2 New Genesis, Crowfall, and Mortal Online 2 are a few average new releases we've had this year. Guild Wars 2 is dropping a new expansion soon, which I'm looking forward to. Palia, a casual MMO by ex-Blizzard devs, was announced this year, which looks like the perfect game to play with the girlfriend you don't have. Arcade 2, Core Punk, Blue Protocol, TL Origin, Crimson Desert, and Diablo 4 are all on the horizon. We've recently started to see a new breed of MMOs built on blockchain raising more money for development than was previously possible through crowdfunding, and we've seen Ashes of Creation dropping the NDA for its Alpha 1 and giving backers the chance to play the game for the first time, already showing a lot of promise by Alpha standards. With all that stuff going on, I'm actually excited for the future of the genre for the first time in a long time. In the coming years, we're going to reach the point where we've got multiple top tier MMOs to choose from, World of Warcraft will continue to drop in dominance, and the desire for a WoW killer will lessen to the point where the concept isn't even a thing anymore. Until one day, out of nowhere, a crazy tech billionaire reveals their latest device that takes our mind to places we've only ever seen in movies. Thanks for watching.